In this video, I'll talk about backwards thinking. I already spoke about backwards thinking in the past, in multiple videos. And probably I already spoke about backwards thinking in some of these remind videos. But I'll talk about it again, so you'll understand what backwards thinking is. Backwards thinking simply comes down to this. People hold onto a security that isn't real. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that the security isn't real. But because the people don't think straight, because they have faulty ways of thinking, they can't perceive that whatever they're holding on to is not going or is not able to provide them real security. That is what backwards thinking comes down to. So, let me give an example. Let's say that Jack goes to the post office every evening. Let's say you hear that statement. What will you think? You may think, oh, probably Jack is posting some mail. That's why he goes every evening. Someone else may hear this statement and think, hold on a minute. Is Jack writing so many letters? I mean, you have WhatsApp today, you have Facebook, you have all types of social media where you can communicate instantly. Why would you write so many letters? So he's going to the post office every evening, but hold on a minute. Isn't the post office closed at night or near the evening? So you hear the statement, Jack goes to the post office every evening. Some will hear this statement and they'll think, well, probably it's just to post some mail, which is correct. Someone else look at this more carefully and thinks, hold on a minute, why would you go every evening? They look more at the bigger picture. And then you have someone that thinks, hold on a minute, maybe he's working at the post office. An individual goes online and says, you see here, that post office has people working night shifts. And now you understand why Jack went to the post office every evening. Because if he didn't have a job, it wouldn't make any sense for him to go to the post office every evening. You get what I'm saying here? If he didn't have any mail that he wanted to be delivered, he wouldn't even go to the post office, especially in the evening, because prior to the evening, around 5 o'clock, they already gather all the mail and send them to some distribution center where it's being distributed to be sent to its destination. So it wouldn't even make sense, even if he had a lot of letters, to go to the post office every evening. So why am I using this example of Jack going to the post office? It's because when you hear this statement and you evaluate it, you'll see that it is in a context. If you miss the context, you won't get it. You may get the statement, but you will not get the applicability and the use of the statement because you don't know the context. And looking at the bigger picture is about seeing the context or seeing parts of the context if you can't see everything at once. Now let's say now that you have Frank now that goes to the post office every evening. But he has no job over there. He's not into sending physical letters. He's not into that. So then you may ask, why is he going to the post office every evening? Well, truth being told, Frank is not going to the post office every evening. He is cheating on his wife and is using the post office as an excuse. In this case, there was no context that justified him going to the post office every evening. So here you can see clearly it doesn't add up. Now, this parable of going to the post office, just think about it and how it relates to backwards thinking. In backwards thinking, people hold on to certain expectations. Those expectations aren't practical, or else people wouldn't hold on to them, but those expectations don't add up when you put them in context. For example, let's say you have a group of people they live in a village. They have their jobs in town, but they live in a village. And they don't talk to strangers at all. They don't. So one day, a police officer comes by because a homicide has been committed. But the people didn't want to talk to the police. Why? Because it's an unwritten rule, you don't talk to strangers. It's a hardcore belief that they are holding on to. Don't talk to strangers. And while the police is there, then one of the elders of the community comes along and he talks to the police. And the police ask him, "Sir, why aren't these people cooperating with us? They are breaking the law." Then the elder tells them, "Well, these people over here, they don't want to talk to strangers because you never know with the strangers. You don't know who they are. You know what they can do. So they want to talk to those they know, they are familiar with, because you can predict what those people will do. You can anticipate their behavior. You can't anticipate the behavior of a stranger because you don't know them. You don't know how they will respond. So you want to have security, you avoid strangers." But then one of the police officers tells them, "Sir, what you say here is factual. A stranger, you know nothing about him or her, you can't really anticipate their behavior properly because you don't have much information about him or her. You don't have much experience with the individual. That's factual. But your whole mindset of not talking to strangers is wrong. First of all, a homicide has been committed in your community. And there are no strangers around there because everyone knows everyone. So your whole hypothesis that talking to strangers is dangerous is wrong. We're strangers here, but we're here to solve something. Well, one of you over here, one of your own, committed homicide. So it doesn't add up that you hold on to this backwards thinking, never talk to strangers. In the parable I just gave on to you, it's obvious that the people there had the backwards way of thinking, never talking to strangers. First of all, they go to their jobs in town, 5 days in a week. There are strangers over there. Well, not really strangers because they kind of know the colleagues, but encounter many strangers that they need to talk to. For example, the bus driver or a stranger down the streets or someone in a supermarket that helps them. So this whole mindset, don't talk to strangers, it's backwards. Now, if you would say to a child, don't talk to strangers, there's a context. And because there is a context, it can be justified. Why? Because a child is vulnerable. A child doesn't have the capacity to look through things. So a child is vulnerable for sexual molestation, vulnerable for kidnapping and all of that. So you tell a child, don't talk to strangers. But this is only justified as long as the child is still a child. The moment the child enters the teenage years, he or she needs to interact with strangers. That's how he or she will develop friendships. That's how they will develop their social capital. That's how they will find their mate later on in life. They need to talk to strangers. And here's the thing, when they find a mate, they will learn their family-in-law. So those people are also strangers. So you need to talk to strangers. You get what I'm saying here? So backwards thinking is a way of thinking in which people hold on to some security that is not security at all. Now you may ask, why are people holding on to backwards thinking? Simply said, it gives them the validation of being someone. If you have this mentality, I never talk to strangers, that implies that you know certain people that according to you are safe. That means you claim a certain type of mastership, that you can discern people. This gives you self-validation. So it's for self-validation people hold on to backwards thinking. And this self-validation is really their only concern. They're not concerned whether that way of thinking of theirs is right or not, whether it's practical or not. What concerns them is that they are validated by it. Especially if the environment, let's say their friends, family, or colleagues, vindicate their way of thinking. Look, it's common that people want to be around those that are like them. There's nothing wrong with that, it's natural. It becomes problematic, however, if people are seeking for relief together and they avoid evaluating what they're doing. When that happens, you have a cult. That's really the definition of a cult. A cult is when people seek relief together and they agree, even though they will never say this out loud, but they agree together that they will never evaluate nor examine what they're doing. They just want to be relieved and that's it. And anyone that doesn't match their relief, they cast out. He or she is an enemy. That is a cult. And all cults have backwards thinking. Every cult has its particular backwards thinking, or else you can't be part of that cult if you are not assigned, or say if you're not into that backwards way of thinking. Here's another thing about backwards thinking. Backwards thinking can contain true facts. Backwards thinking isn't automatically completely wrong. But backwards thinking is backwards because the security you're aiming for isn't there. That's why it deceives you. That's why it traps you. That's why it endangers you. For example, people that used to be in relationships or marriages with narcissistic personalities or sociopathic personalities, they remained in those relationships because they thought, you know what, where there's a problem, two people are at fault, which is a statement that a lot of people agree with. And based on that saying, they think if there are problems, we can work it out. And people have this expectation that when you point out someone is wrong and it's obvious, they'll have to acknowledge it and they'll change. Now, it's a true fact that if there are issues, people should work it out. It's a true fact that when you point out that something is wrong and you have evidence, then it's true and right that someone has to admit, okay, that they are wrong. That's a true fact. And those are two true facts. You can't debate them because they're real. But based on those two true facts, people concluded, you know what, that's why I'm in this relationship and I'm remaining because we can work things out. No, that's backwards thinking. Because your partner in this case is a narcissist. He or she has no interest in thinking straight. You are thinking straight. You're thinking factual. And because you think factual, you make conclusions based on factual data. But you forget completely that the narcissist is not interested in factual data. He's only interested in his self-validation. He is obsessed with his own self-validation and he enrages at anything that threatens it. So such an individual, true facts, no matter how hard the evidence is, won't matter. So you had the backwards thinking that you could work things out with that individual. And this backwards thinking kept you in the abusive and dangerous relationship. And some people remain with this backwards thinking and it cost them their lives. You see now how dangerous backwards thinking is? Backwards thinking is thinking that traps you into a false security that will let you down eventually. Sooner or later, the false security will reveal itself what it really is. It's false, it's non-existent. There are backwards ideas that are obvious they're backwards. For example, the idea that people, because of the tone of their skin, have superior qualities. Well, that's called racism. And it's obvious when you look at that idea that it doesn't add up. There is no data whatsoever to support it. There's false data that you can put out of context that may seem to support it, but it's not true. Anyone that looks at it in ease will see it doesn't add up. So there are backwards ideas that are obvious they're backwards. But there are also ideas that seem good, but when you look at them carefully, you realize this is a trap. Backwards thinking also implies thinking that's almost good or almost safe. But it's almost good, almost safe, but it's not safe nor good. So discernment isn't only seeing through stuff to see what's wrong and what's right. It's also seeing the difference between something that's almost right and something that's right. One example, someone may say that they believe the Bible. Okay, the Bible contains historical facts. The Bible contains statements that people made. The Bible contains reports, but not everything in the Bible is Christ-centered. Look how Cain behaved and killed his brother That's not Christ-centered. It is in the Bible, so it's biblical, but it is not in line with Christ. All right? And there are statements made, for example, in the book of Job, God gives and God takes away. But when you look at the context, Job was miserable because he was so sad. He lost all his children, all his possessions. He was overwhelmed. That's when he said it. Okay? He had lack of knowledge. Let me say he lacked understanding. So when you read that, God gives and takes away, and you hold on to it, saying it's biblical, okay, it's biblical because it's written in the Bible, but it's not in line with Christ. Christ said, I came so they will have life and life more abundantly. So life and abundance, that's what Christ came to give, not to give and take away. You get what I'm saying here? So when someone says they believe the Bible and they stand on it, it sounds very good, very Christ-like. But when you evaluate it, it's almost good, but it's not good. The right attitude would be that they follow Christ, they believe Christ, and they stand on his promises. You see the difference? One stands on the Bible, and cults use the Bible all the time for their projects. So when you believe the Bible, any cult can lure you in, but the other one believes Christ and he stands on his promises. You see the big difference? So you have statements or ideas or attitudes that appear good, or let me say they are almost good. They're in the right direction, but they're not good. They're almost safe, but they're not safe. You get what I'm saying here? That's why in the book of Proverbs it's written, I believe twice, that there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end of it leads unto death. That's why the book of Proverbs also says, do not rely on your own understanding, but to trust the Lord with all your heart. All your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Your own understanding can be practical. For example, when you're riding a bicycle, or when you're driving a car, or when you're baking a cake, or when you're crossing the streets. So your own understanding has practical use, but don't rely on it. Because your own understanding is limited, and your own understanding can trick you, can deceive you. And the enemy and people around you can use your own understanding to manipulate you. Or to, let me say, to bring you to a place where you normally wouldn't have gone by your own volition. Why do you think so many companies, so many firms, why do you think so many of them spend millions, some even billions on advertisement? Why would they do that? For example, there's a commercial on TV, and for 20 seconds there's this music that you hear in a commercial. And after the 20 seconds, one of the characters that play in the commercial says something. And you find out that the company paid 30 million euros just to use those 20 seconds. And you think, why would they spend 30 million euros for just 20 seconds of a song? Just like the statement in the beginning of this video, I believe it was Jack goes to the post office every evening. If you only would look at that statement, you would think this is weird. This doesn't add up. But when you look at the context, you will understand. The people that rule that company, which are pagans, and they have so-called secret knowledge, they know how the masses operate, know how human beings think, they know how the brain processes information. That's why they know what they're doing. They know that if they spend 30 million for that 20 seconds of a song, they know that those 30 million isn't lost. Because even if they don't make that much profit, people become attached to their brand. So it can be they spend 30 million euros, but in exchange for the next 10 or 20 years, they have millions of customers. I'm not saying all those customers are spending a lot of money on the products of the company, but now they are an established company. Why? Because people are social creatures. When they become attached to something, they'll begin to spread around. So they know how social dynamics work. So that's why they use a song, because a song makes people feel comfortable. And because of this, people associate this comfort with the brand. So psychologically, there's also work out in society. And that's how the brand establishes itself. So those 30 million euros are not wasted. They get a lot back for it, and not only in money. Because a lot of people think corporations want to make money. So if a corporation wants to make money and they spend 30 million euros for 20 seconds of a song, you may think, hold on a minute, why wasting all that money? And let's say you find out later that they only made 20 million euros in selling products in 5 years' time. Then you think, hold on a minute, you lost 10 million euros, but hold on a minute. At the other hand, that firm is now established in the community. People see that firm or say that company as part of their daily life. And this is not something that money in itself could accomplish. But they use the money to play a psychological trick on the population, and that worked. So now, even though the company may not make that much money because people don't spend that much on their products, they're still in business. And because of that, there's still employment. Because people work over there. And because there's employment, there's less criminality. So when you look at the bigger picture, what they were doing, spending 30 million euros for just 20 seconds, it made perfect sense. But only when you look at the context, it's only then you will understand it. In the same way, backwards thinking appears right until you look at the bigger picture. Then you find out there's a lot wrong with this. It is not my intention to discuss all backwards thinking here because that's not possible. There are many, many self-destructive ways of thinking out there in the world that appear good and appear safe, but they're far from safe and far from good. I don't have the mental nor physical capacity to talk about all of them. So I'm not doing that. I'm just pointing out to you how backwards thinking operates. How it, let me say, I just explained to you what backwards thinking is. That's why Scripture makes plain that we ought to be renewed in our mind. There are worldly people that can see through some backwards thinking. But even then, they're blind to their own backwards thinking patterns that they're holding on to. When you're renewed in your mind, you'll be able to see through stuff instantly. Even though you may not realize this, but when you are renewed in your mind, you'll sense quickly when something doesn't add up. Just understand the following. A lot of people have no intention of evaluating their expectations. They want their unexamined expectations to remain unexamined. Why? Simply said, their daily life is based on backwards thinking. It can be that you have a couple. The two are together, but both of them have expectations of this romantic relationship that don't add up. But both agree with those expectations and they're all working hard to make the relationship work. And this working hard gives them a sense of relief. And both of them are clinging to this sense of relief. The moment one of those partners begin to evaluate his or her expectations, the whole relationship will end. And let's say that both people want the relationship to continue, despite all the fights, despite all the, contention that the relationship brings forth. They want to hold on to the relief that the relationship provides them. In that case, those two people are not interested in the truth nor interested in any insight. They'll avoid it like the plague because they're holding on to relief. They are relief seekers, even when they realize that their relationship is toxic and that they should stop it or, let me say, or reform. They won't do it because they're so attached to that self-validation they get from that relationship. Such people may from time to time pretend as if they want help and seek help from marriage counselors or from psychologists or from friends or family. They may even go online on YouTube looking for videos to help them. But they're not sincere. They just want relief to work out for them without the obvious side effects. They want to fight and reduce the side effects of what they're involved in. So they don't really want any help. They just want to avoid side effects and they will use other people to avoid facing those side effects. Another thing, it can be that someone has a position at the job in which he's quite stern towards others. And he also has a group of friends where he likes to hang out. But let's say this individual grew up in a verbally abusive household, and this caused psychological trauma inside of him. And he is related to others based on this psychological trauma. That's why he or she turned out into this no-nonsense individual. And people began to respect and validate this no-nonsense personality. It's this no-nonsense personality that gave him the appearance as if he has management and leadership qualities, which he doesn't have. Okay, let's say it's a he. It can be a she also, but this individual has no real leadership or management qualities, but this no-nonsense attitude that he or she has become accustomed to gives the appearance as if he has this management or leadership qualities. And that's why he got the promotion at the job. And the friends he's around are also people like him who are in denial, and they are seeking relief in all kinds of hobbies. Now, there's nothing wrong with those hobbies, okay? And there's nothing wrong with meeting people who have similar interests as you. But in this case, this individual, let's say it's a he. The moment he faces his unexamined expectations and he goes to the root of them, which are rooted in trauma, the moment he faces that, he'll need to acknowledge that the relationships he has today are all rooted in trauma. And because they're rooted in trauma, they center around relief seeking. So also his no-nonsense attitude is no real honesty to begin with. It's not honest. Because he's not honest with himself. The moment he faces this, what will happen? Well, healing can occur. But then he needs to remove himself from those friends, because those friends will keep him trapped. Now, he may still keep his job, but he doesn't believe anymore in this no-nonsense attitude because he realizes it's a facade. So he can never go back to how things were. And this is what I said in an earlier Remind video. A lot of folks don't want real life change. I'm talking about change for the better. A lot of folks don't want that because they are accustomed to how things are. They can anticipate and manipulate other people based on how things are now. Once real change happens, now they need to face challenges naturally. And they never really faced challenges naturally. So they don't want real life change for the better. They just want extended relief. Don't get me wrong here. Relationships can be reformed. In the parable of the couple that both had their unexamined expectations, that the relationship, that marriage can reform and become healthy. But both need to acknowledge their unexamined expectations and both need to take their natural responsibility to repent. If both don't want it, or if only one of them doesn't want it, it's over. It is not easy to recover from backwards thinking. It's not. But that is not an excuse to remain in backwards thinking. Because even if nobody feels bothered by your backwards thinking and backwards operating, it's still dangerous. So you are keeping danger around you. And by doing that, you're keeping yourself accursed. And by doing that, you're attracting demons to yourself. So even if your backwards thinking and backwards operating doesn't really bother anyone else, because everyone is just at ease, that doesn't mean it's alright. Okay? And this is another form of backwards thinking that a lot of people use. If others are not bothered by them and people leave them alone, they think they're alright. No, that's not true. To have a Christ-centered attitude implies that some people are bothered by you and are annoyed at you. But you operate in safety. What do you rather have? Operate in safety and some people turn on you because they don't want to be realistic, or you rather have people that hold on to darkness to be at ease with you, but you are in danger? Well, a lot of folks choose the second option, which I cannot understand why, but you know what? That's how a lot of worldly people are. Now you understand why some relationships, whether it's marriage, romantic, or friendships, or business relationships, now you understand why certain relationships are doomed to fail. Now you understand why certain people are not good for you. Let me repeat this. Some people are not good for you. Some people will draw you into danger. I said it. Some are not good for you. I'm not saying those people intend to harm you, but some people, because they hold on to backwards thinking, they operate in danger. You know that. They attract demons onto them. And such people, let me say, some of them will bring heart attacks to you, high blood pressure, financial difficulties, physical sicknesses, um, demonic parasites like python spirits. Some may even lead you into dangerous circumstances where you become the victim of a crime. And unfortunately, sometimes it happens that people become homicide victims because of wrong associations. So I'm telling you, some people are not good for you. Stop mourning and being sad because they left you. Be glad they left you. You don't know what you have been spared from. I'm telling you, people that leave you because they want to examine their expectations, they're not good for you. Agree with Christ. Be at peace.